Well, I would say I learned a valuable lesson today, and that is to never count out wildfire in California. Over the last 4 or 5 days, we haven't seen very much growth on the park fire, and we had seemingly somewhat similar conditions expected throughout the day today. It's hot and dry with winds, no big difference from where they have been the last couple of days, but clearly, we're seeing a large increase in activity compared to previous days. I've also seen the reports of some spot fires popping up. So, yeah, definitely looks like my forecast was wrong this morning. I was thinking that we would see some growth, that, we'd see some smoke, but this is definitely looking far more active than it has been over the last couple of days. So, just looking in here, you can see earlier this morning we had some smoke coming off of the fire, but then you see it punch through right there. That tells you how much heat is just being generated at the surface. And I'm going to try to pull up the live chat just so I can hear if you guys have any questions while I'm talking here. Because what we're going to do is basically just try to figure out what information we can about the park fire. Maybe try to figure out why conditions are seemingly different than previous days and why it is so much more active. My first question would be if the winds maybe picked up more than they have in previous days. So up here is Shingletown. I guess maybe the first thing we should do is just check out kind of where this fire is, just in case anybody's just joining the live stream and you're not familiar with the area. So before I get into this again, bad forecast this morning. I was hoping that my video this morning was going to be my last update. I thought, if it didn't blow up on Saturday when we were in triple digits with dry conditions and the chance of thunderstorms, then I was thinking, you know what? We're probably fine now with this one. It seemed like they were tying it all together. Seems like we were moving in the right direction, but it definitely does look like things have picked up again. So, yeah, apologies there, but live and learn, and I think the lesson today is you can never count out wildfire when you're in the peak wildfire season in California, especially when it's triple digits and your relative humidity is in the teens. So, Chico, down on the south here, I guess maybe the first thing I should point out is that it doesn't look like any community right now is in direct danger, but we are starting to see the fire move a bit faster than previously anticipated. So that's going to be the one major question we're going to try to answer in this video is anybody in danger right now? So Chico to the south, you guys are good because the smoke's going up towards the north, meaning that the fire where it is active is going to be moving towards the north. It almost actually looks like it's moving perfectly northeast. So Chico south, Red Bluff west, Manton, Shingletown, you guys I would say are still in a very good position. Same with Paradise, same with Magalia, Forest Ranch, even Butte Meadows. It looks like all of our largest communities around the fire are in still a pretty good position because if we turn on structures here, this is going to be Chico down here. Where those red squares are, that's showing where the fire is the most active right now, where we have some heat being picked up by the satellites. We have Paradise down here, Magalia down here, and you notice there hasn't really been any heat activity around this entire southern, western, and even northern part of the fire any time recently. The only spot where we have had some activity is around Deer Creek and Mill Creek. And a big part of the reason for that, if we go to Google Earth here, hopefully this Google Earth works in the live stream. It's been giving me trouble over the last week or two, but right around here is where the fire is active right now. So this is the northeastern side of the fire. We can kind of back out, take the wide view, and then zoom back in. So you can see what kind of topography we're dealing with, what kind of fuels we're dealing with as well. So zooming in, I would imagine the most active part right now is right in Mill Creek. And I don't know if we have any weather stations in here, but I wonder if what happened is when you get into the afternoon, you can get strong winds funneling through a canyon. And I wonder if that just took this spot, kind of flared it back up within the canyon. And then we've seen the report of more spots popping up right there. But just looking, I'm going to actually come back here. I think the Google Earth is making it go a bit slow, but that's showing where the heat is right now. First thing I should say about this is that it overestimates how much heat there actually is, because it picks up on some of the heat that's in the smoke plume. So it doesn't mean that the fire is extended all the way to here, but that is definitely the largest amount of activity we've seen on this fire. And I would say over a week, really all last week, we barely saw any growth. And I think that's why I had that maybe false sense of confidence. I let the optimism get the best of me in my forecast this morning, because I thought, if it didn't blow up last week, if it didn't blow up this weekend when it was very hot and dry, then, don't see a big change throughout the day today and we should be fine. But clearly the situation has changed in California, or at least on this northeastern finger of the fire right there. So if there is a community that would be at risk, I would still be surprised if it were able to reach all the way up to Mineral throughout the day today. It's 4:30 right now. This is the peak of wildfire activity probably for the next hour, and then we'll start to see things die down, hopefully tonight as things get a little bit cooler. Although we should check to see what the moisture recovery is doing. Oh, actually, I might have to take back that statement I just made, because what you hope at night, and what we had last week that was helping us out a lot, is during the overnight hours, the relative humidity was going way up. But right there, that actually shows that it's going to be staying dry overnight. So that would say that, we might actually not see this calm down all that much during the overnight hours. So just looking at the video again, you can see that large smoke plume about to blow up right there. Just in the last hour to 2 hours, you see that large increase in activity. So I see maybe somebody has a question here. Any idea why there are no tankers in use? So let's check out the watch duty. They show, looks like there are some helicopters. We've got some small planes on this side of the fire. I could not tell you why there are no tankers in use. Usually if there's no tankers in use, it's because there's maybe too much smoke in that area. And if we look at the satellite imagery, and also thank you, Lucy, for pointing out that there's a good question in there, that's a lot of smoke coming off of the fire right now. And where the tankers would be most effective would be dropping that retardant in front of where the fire is moving to try to get it to stop moving so quickly. But you see how much smoke is right there. I don't know if you even would be able to put a tanker in front of the fire. And that is a lot of smoke right there. That little white mark at the end, that's a pyrocumulus cloud, and that's what we're actually seeing on this camera as well. So that's the shot from just right to the west of Lake Almanor. What got me to get back on this live stream was I knew that I was going to check the conditions this afternoon to see if things picked up, to see if my forecast was wrong. And then I checked my comments first, and somebody said, hey, I'm in Chester and it looks like it's blowing up. So then I looked at the satellite imagery, I looked at Alert California, and sure enough, it is. So the forecast was wrong, and it's unfortunate that it was, because it looks like it is definitely picking up steam once again. So we'll just go back to the 3 hour right there. While that's loading up, we can look at this camera. This is from Bald Mountain Butte 2. And man, it must have started to pick up right after I did my live stream this morning. I think I did it around 11:30. And, there was some smoke coming off of the fire, but really not much. And now you're seeing a lot of smoke coming off it, big pyrocumulus as well. And just going back to watch duty, I want to see what their most recent... So the Tehama County Sheriff's Office has issued an evacuation order for that zone, along the Mill Creek Plateau west of Highway 32. This zone is located on the east side of the fire area. So west of Highway 32, right there you see 32. It's coming up right there. So it sounds like we have new evacuation order for TEH 720A. So that's going to be that zone right there. So that kind of tells you where, yeah, fire is certainly not out. Luckily, I didn't say that the fire was going to be out, but I definitely did say that I was hoping that my video this morning would be the last one that I would do. But yeah, it is not over until it's over. And it's just amazing that we had it over a week where there was almost nothing on this fire. And now if we look at this camera, it's the most active day we've seen since not last Friday, but the Friday before that, which was basically like the first 5 days of the fire was when it was taking off towards the north, moving about 30 to 40 miles in just the course of a few days. And then we saw very little growth all of last week, and now the fire is just absolutely blowing up once again. So coming back over here, this might explain it a bit. So much of last week, I mean, it doesn't. Maybe it's on this east side here. You're seeing some wind gusts around 15 to 23 miles per hour. So that right there might explain why it's much more active today than in previous days, as the winds came up to about 25 miles per hour. But then if you look up towards Mineral, that's showing 9 mile per hour winds. And then southwest of Mineral, 10 mile per hour winds. So kind of the main reason I wasn't thinking it was going to blow up today was because winds weren't supposed to be that strong. And around the Mineral to southwest of Mineral, it still doesn't look like the winds are very strong. And unfortunately, we have kind of a weather observation desert right around Mill Creek, but just maybe the closest one we can find is to the south of there, where it is showing some 20 mile per hour winds. So winds are a tricky thing to figure out just because of the lack of weather stations exactly where this fire is active right now. So just showing where it is active right now, we can come back out here. And this shows north side of the fire, west side of the fire, south side of the fire. You guys are all still good. And especially Red Bluff, Chico, Paradise, Magalia. Because if we put the winds on right now, that's showing the wind direction. And that shows why this fire is now moving up towards the north. Took that small heat that we had this morning, and now it's just pushing it directly up towards the northeast. And yeah, I would imagine maybe what happened here is some of the winds started to pick up in the canyon, especially with the heat that we had this afternoon. Some temperatures in the triple digits, relative humidity in the teens. Then you get that temperature contrast between the canyon bottom and the canyon walls, starts to lead to some stronger winds, takes that little spot fire that we had right there, increases activity. And then if we go back to watch duty where we were reading their most recent update, they're most likely talking about the increase in spot fires as well. Oh, so this is going to answer somebody's question. I know somebody asked about tankers, and it looks like Air Attack has requested 2 very large air tankers and 5 Type 1 tankers, including 3 National Guard MAFFS, to start a retardant operation on the south side of the Mill Creek drainage. So south side of the Mill Creek drainage. That would be right around there. That would be south side of Mill Creek drainage. But it does seem like it's now established itself above Mill Creek. And it sounds like we're getting some spots there. Yeah, so I see Ridge Runner is pointing out the fire history in this area. That's something we've looked at on CalTopo. If you look at fire history, we did have Ponderosa fire up here in 2012. I guess that's maybe some good news because that's between where we have a lot of this heat right now and then communities like Manton and Shingletown. And I'm not exactly sure if we actually got help from the Ponderosa fire in 2012. No, we did, because I remember hearing that after this fire, they cleared out a lot of trees in this area. But what also might have happened here is you have 36, and it looks like, especially around Sky Ranch right there, they're able to use 36, perhaps along with the Ponderosa burn scar, to keep the fire from going towards the north right there. And it's almost a perfect little puzzle piece between where the park fire goes and where the Ponderosa fire is. So that gives us some confidence that we at least have this little barrier between where that heat activity is and places like Manton and Shingletown. But I would say the other reason it wouldn't go directly that direction is because that would be more of a southeasterly wind, whereas you look at the green on this map, I'll click it on and off, that's showing the wind direction right now. It's southwest, so that's going to take this heat and continue to move it up towards the northeast. And the other way we know that we have that southwesterly wind is if we look at the plume right now, it is blowing directly up towards the northeast. And you can just see that huge smoke plume right there, that white starting to show up. That's the pyrocumulus cloud. So, looking right there, this is going to show the big increase in activity over the last hour or two. Oh, it actually is going to show some of the spot fires that are starting now as well. So, I've said that term a couple times. I'm sure most of you know what that means. But basically, spot fire is when... There's actually a good image of it on our Google Earth imagery, because we got one of those in Mill Creek not too long ago. So a spot fire, basically, here's your main fire. Burning ember gets picked up. These fuels are very dry, very abundant. They've been heating up even more over the last month because of how hot it has been, especially that heat wave we had at the beginning of July. So then you get a burning ember, drops into those dry fuels, starts a new little fire, and then that's able to grow. And now what it seems like is happening is it's almost kind of leapfrogging here, where this one is now maybe creating some spot fires on this side of the canyon, and then wildfire also likes to go uphill. So once either that one, this spot fire moves down into the bottom of the canyon, or you get another little spot fire, then it quickly rushes up that side. And I would imagine when we get the new fire perimeter data tomorrow, we're going to see that most likely happened right there. And then it also seems like we're now getting some fires establishing up above to the north of Mill Creek. Yeah, I think that's well said. The ceiling lifted, so the fire took off. It's almost like if you have a chimney and then you open up the damper and you create all that airflow, then your fire becomes a lot more active. And I mean, just looking at some of this imagery here, I think this one probably shows it the best. Seems like that's what exactly what happened. That's maybe when your damper is closed. That's maybe when I was doing my live stream this morning, and it still looked like, yeah, there's some smoke coming off of it, but it doesn't look that bad. It's probably just going to be like the last few days where, it burns a couple thousand acres, but nothing major. And then maybe right after my live stream ended, and I was hoping that would be my last video on the park fire because it really hadn't done anything in the last week, and I was kind of getting tired of saying the exact same thing over and again. I should have knocked on wood. It's almost like I jinxed it, or the fire heard me and then just watch this. And then that ceiling gets lifted off, damper gets opened, you get a lot more airflow in there, fire becomes a lot more active. And then when you have this much rising motion, this is when the fire actually starts to create its own weather as well, because when you get that much rising air, then you need air coming in to take its place, and then that can pick up more burning embers and lead to more spot fires, like what we've been seeing on some of these cameras. So just reading, shows Morgan Summit camera shows fire approaching. Let's see if we can find that one. So this one is Stover. See that big pyrocumulus now. This one is Bald Mountain. Good view of the pyrocumulus as well. And then this one is Colby Mountain, shows some of those spot fires right there. So now let's see if we can find This next one, Morgan Summit. So there's Morgan Summit. Oh, wow. So let's look on the map. This is going to be right around Mineral. So this is a perfect camera to be looking at. And the reason that I say that is because I would say Mineral is my top concern right now, just because of where the heat is, the direction the wind is going, and the fact that it is moving the fire directly towards Mineral. And I should also now mention that this always over-exaggerates how far the fire has gone because it picks up on some of the heat in the smoke plume. But, I mean, based on what we're seeing on some of these cameras, this fire definitely looks to be moving fairly quickly. So, coming back here, this camera is going to be Morgan Summit in Mineral, looking down at the fire. You can actually see where Mill Creek, oh, this is what happened. So you see how Mill Creek comes up like this, and then it curves right around here. Can almost, I can't guarantee this, but you imagine what your winds are doing right now. They're probably right in this canyon. And they picked up throughout the day today because it was so hot out there that you get that big temperature contrast, and then the winds are rushing up. And that's going to be overall a pretty northeasterly direction right there within the canyon. Best way I can describe this is it's almost like if you put your thumb over a hose and then it starts going out a lot faster. That's what happens to winds in canyons like that. It starts going a lot faster. All right, so now that we have our camera up in Mineral, looking down at Mill Creek, down into the fire, let's actually see what this one has looked like. Let's go maybe 6 hours, because I want to see if we can actually see some of the spot fires picking up as well. Maybe it looks like some of the smoke starts coming in. They turn the camera around to look at the fire. This point, that might now I was going to say that might explain why we haven't seen more tankers on it, just because you can now see how smoky the air is. But Watch Duty did just call for a bunch of tankers, so it sounds like there are some tankers along the way, and we'll keep an eye on Watch Duty to see if we can actually see them. So that's the view from Mineral right now. And let's say worst case scenario. Again, I'll reiterate, this over exaggerates how fast the fire goes. But let's just assume that that's how far the fire has gone today. So we can go from the previous fire perimeter to, let's go worst case scenario right here. I would say it's moved about 4.6 miles in the last maybe 5 hours, because I mean, when I did my live stream this morning at 11, there was very little activity. It didn't really look like it was moving at all. We had some smoke, but not very much. So it's since 12 o'clock that this fire has really started to pick up. And then if we say worst case scenario to Mineral, looks like it's 3 miles to Mineral. So worst case scenario, in the last 5 hours, it's moved about 4.5 miles. And then we would still have about 3 miles to Mineral. I guess the good news there is that the fire should, again, I gotta watch my optimism. That should be the lesson that I learned throughout the day today, if nothing else, because it looked like everything was good this morning, and look what the fire is doing right now. So that's something that I've known can sometimes skew my forecasting, and today is a perfect example of that. But basically what I'm now correcting what I was going to say is that it's going to calm down a lot overnight tonight, but it may not actually calm down that much tonight because of this. So I know these charts can be kind of confusing. So what that white column right here is showing is the rest of the day today. The dark shaded column is showing tonight, and then that's going to be tomorrow. So it does look like tomorrow is another very hot, dry day. Temperatures up in the mid to high 90s. Relative humidity actually looking drier than we were throughout the day today, dropping into the single digits. I'd say what I'm most worried about right now, though, is that the relative humidity is not recovering very much overnight. So what you'd like to see is your relative humidity to go up to 70 to 80% overnight. That's something that we had last week, which was why we didn't have much activity last week. But now it looks like that kind of dry air has really moved back in over the region. Now, one good thing, though, and this isn't just me being an optimist, but it's actually maybe something that we can kind of pull as our silver lining, is it does look like the wind direction is going to be changing tonight. So right now it looks very southerly. You see the direction those arrows are going. And then tonight it looks like it's a lot more northeasterly and almost easterly. So what that would do, if you have a northeasterly wind, it would try to push this fire back into itself. So the worst thing that we could have right now, or overnight tonight, would be like what we had on the first couple of days of this fire, where it was strong southerly winds basically all night long. It does look like the winds are going to be calmer and shifting direction overnight tonight. So that right there is good news, but I would say it is unfortunately mostly bad news, because we have certainly seen the activity pick up. This is the view from Mineral, and just the fact that the smoke is coming directly at the camera means that the fire is moving towards Mineral. And again, when I say that, there is worst case scenario, we still have 3 miles between where the fire is and Mineral, but worst case scenario, it may have moved over 4 miles within the last 5 hours. So certainly looks like this fire has been picking up steam, and it's been spotting along the way. And I see somebody in the live chat just mentioned Bald Mountain Butte, so we haven't refreshed this one in a while. Wow. Oh, man. Yep. Fire's certainly not calming down. It's amazing. We had over a week where the fire did basically nothing. And then today it completely popped off. You know, and there was plenty of reasons to think that it would pop off. Temperatures in the triple digits, relative humidity, very dry out there, fuels that haven't burnt out in decades, and then also fuels that are exceptionally dry because of all the heat that we've been having recently. But, you know, we had some of those days over the weekend and nothing really happened, but clearly things changed throughout the day today, and it seems that perhaps our winds did pick up a bit more today than they had in previous days, and that looks to be making the difference right here. Because, well, also, winds don't need to be as strong the drier things are. Because there's two things that are going to lead to fast fire spread, like we're seeing on this image right here. One is wind, because that provides more oxygen to the fire. It pushes the fire forward. It's able to pick up burning embers and toss them ahead of the fire. And then that's where you get really rapid growth. But also, if it's very dry, as we're seeing today, relative humidity in the teens to potentially even dropping into the single digits in some places, what that does is it takes all the moisture out of the fuels. So then if the winds pick up a burning ember and drop them in those dry fuels, it's much more likely, because it's dry, that burning ember is going to turn into a new fire or your spot fire. But it also means that the fire is able to move faster, because if there's not a lot of moisture in your fuels, the fire doesn't need to use any of its energy to evaporate that moisture before it leads to more combustion. It just is able to go straight into combustion and move a lot faster, keep a lot more of its energy. And it looks like that is exactly what is going on right now with those big pyrocumulus clouds and the largest smoke plume that we have seen on the park fire since not last Friday, but the Friday before that. We haven't seen anything like this over the last week. So that's the view from Bald Mountain Butte. So this is from the east, looking at this northeastern section of the fire right there. So I see Isaac just said, would the smoke help lower temperatures, or is that only when the smoke is more stagnant? So unfortunately, your daytime maximum temperature is usually around 3 to 4 p.m. in the afternoon, and it's 5 p.m. right now. So kind of the damage has already been done when it comes to heating up. Where smoke can help you a lot more is if your winds die down overnight, and then the smoke can settle down over the fire. And then what can occasionally happen is you have so much smoke over the fire that you don't get as much solar radiation coming in, so then you don't heat up as much. And then because you don't heat up as much, you don't get as strong of winds. And then the winds don't blow the smoke out, so then it kind of sits over your fire. That was actually something that happened a number of days last week, which is why we partially had such minimal activity last week. But when you're pretty clear in the morning, and we were clear this morning, and there wasn't very much smoke over the fire this morning because there hadn't been much growth over the last couple of days, we were able to heat up a lot more throughout the day today. So that's a great question right there, because it does bring up the important point that maybe part of the reason that it blew up so much more today than in previous days is because it hadn't blown up in previous days. So there wasn't smoke over the fire. So we were able to see our temperatures go up a lot more this afternoon, which allowed our relative humidity to drop down a lot more this afternoon. That's a good question, because that might solve the mystery a little bit of why it's blowing up so much more today when, the forecast didn't seem to be all that different. And a lot of these weather stations that we're looking at are still just showing around 5 to 12 mile per hour winds. The one in Mineral is 9 mile per hour winds. That's close to nothing. Max gust today, 11 miles per hour. That's very low. But then if we do look down over here to the east of Mill Creek, that is where you see some of those winds between 18 and 23 miles per hour. So we have a little bit of a weather observation desert over Mill Creek, but perhaps some of those strong winds have been able to shift to the west a little bit, and that's partially why we're seeing this much growth and this much activity pushing towards the northeast. And then Colby Mountain Cam looking awful. I think we have that one as well. So there were some of the spot fires that were popping up. Let's actually refresh this one, see what it looks like. So you say other weather pattern moved out. Oh wow, yeah, this one is very. So yeah, the monsoonal moisture certainly has moved out, but we do kind of still just have a ridge building over us. Seems like let's move it back here. Let's check out the overall pattern. And actually, let's go back a couple days so we can see if there's been any big changes. National, let's look at the US. So we've had this big high building over the entire western United States, and that was what led to that clockwise rotation is what led to some of that monsoonal moisture moving in this weekend. We did have some beneficial thunderstorms on Saturday. It actually dropped some drizzle over the fire, some cloud cover helped us out. But as we click through here, now that's getting into today. Yeah, it's still kind of just the exact same high sitting over the western United States. You know what's maybe shifted around a little bit though is, so on this map, one thing to always look for is how close those lines are together. Those are going to be your isobars, your lines of constant pressure. And when those get closer together, that means your winds are going to get stronger. The best way I can explain this is if you have a tray, you're holding a tray in your hands and it's flat, that's going to be like when these lines are very far apart, like what you're seeing over the weekend. And then if you pour water on that tray, that water is not going to go to the other side of the tray very quickly. But as these lines get closer together, like what we're now seeing as we click in closer towards today's forecast, that's like if you tilt your tray and it's like your tray gets steeper, so now if you pour water on it, that water goes a lot faster down the tray. So basically what I'm saying here is our atmosphere looks to have gotten a little bit steeper, so the winds are a little bit stronger than they were over the weekend. That's, again, my maybe best explanation for why we're now seeing some 18 to 23 mile per hour gusts there. But again, where that kind of falls apart a little bit is if you look at Mineral, that station was only showing 9 to 11 mile per hour winds today. But looking at the fire activity certainly has picked up compared to previous days. So just coming back here, another thing that looks to have happened is this little low starts to move in towards the Pacific Northwest, and that's also why those isobars start to tighten a bit, because you have a larger contrast between your high pressure and your low pressure. The atmosphere is steep, leads to those stronger winds. If you look at the direction, coming from the southwest up towards the northeast. If we look at the direction the smoke is going right now, from the southwest up towards the northeast. So that looks to be another piece of the puzzle for why we're seeing so much more activity today compared to previous days. One reason, we had clear skies this morning because there was very little acreage burned over the weekend, so there was very little smoke cover this morning. And then also this larger pressure gradient leading to slightly windier conditions, plus temperatures in almost the triple digits, relative humidity almost in the low teens. So now let's look at this Colby Mountain camera. This looked like it was, moderately active earlier this morning, and then things start to pick up. You see some of those spot fires start, and then once it pans back to the other view, so that spot fire you can see how quickly that spot fire has picked up in activity. And then when we go to the other view, I think it's going to switch back there at the end of this. That is one of the largest smoke plumes that we have seen this season. So, yep, forecast this morning definitely was not my last update on the park fire. After about a week of relative dormancy, it has kicked back to life, and it has, you could say, come back with a vengeance right here. Again, this is the view from Mineral looking down at the fire, where the smoke looks to be moving directly towards Mineral right now. Now I want to check out kind of a view from the east of the fire. I think this is maybe the best view from the east, just to be able to try to see how fast this fire is moving. So that's earlier today when, there was some smoke coming off of it, but not all that much. And then you're going to see things really start to pick up as we get into the hotter, drier parts of the afternoon. Starts right about there, and then you can see how quickly this is moving up towards the northeast. And if you looked closely there, you can actually see some of the air operations right there. That might have been birds, actually. It's hard to tell. I think the best way to tell for air operations is actually looking at watch duty. Let's come in here. Let's see if some of those... So the last we looked at watch duty, they said Air Tank has requested 2 very large air tankers and 5 Type 1 tankers to start a retardant operation on the south side of the Mill Creek drainage. So south side of the Mill Creek drainage would be down here. That would be to protect this fire from moving more towards the east. And then we did have some new evacuation orders that have been put in. And I see Lucy saying, looks like the smoke could hamper the tanker's visibility. Certainly looked that way from the Mineral camera. You see how much smoke that we have out there that's being produced by this fire. So let's see if we can see any of the tankers on the northeastern side of the fire. We're seeing a number of helicopters. And that can maybe give us an idea of where this fire has moved to. So where that red is going to be where some of that heat activity was this morning. Up here is going to be Mineral. And then if we zoom out, where the helicopter's dropping might give us an indication of at least where the fire hasn't moved yet. So it looks like it's maybe halfway between where the fire was this morning and mineral. And that's maybe happened over a 5-hour span. It looked like at 11 we weren't seeing very much movement on the fire. And then it must have picked up around 12, and it's about 5 o'clock right now. So it maybe moved that half the distance to mineral in the last 5 hours. Let's see if we can check out any of these other helicopters to give us an idea. That looks to be the only one that really gives us any clue as to where the fire is. And yet, let's come back here. This could also give us a clue. One thing, so this looks like there's now more heat coming off of the fire than the last time we looked at this map. So I'll maybe clean this up because this map's going to tell us a lot, and we'll just slowly look at it. So we'll start off with what it looked like this morning. That's how much heat activity we had yesterday. Very little. Looks like most of it was actually within the fire perimeter. Barely saw the acreage go up at all. And then we had apparently very little smoke cover this morning. You see how clear the skies are earlier today. That allowed us to heat up a lot more than in previous days, which allowed us to dry up a lot more than in previous days. And then when you heat up more, you also get stronger winds in your canyons. And looks like this Mill Creek Canyon curving around right here is exactly where we're seeing a lot of this activity right now. You can also just see how much fuel is in this area. And that is another problem that we have that we can see on this graphic is when we look at fire history, almost really no fire history within the last two decades between where that hotspot was this morning and then where mineral is up here. And then now we can click on the more recent heat detections. Before I click this, I always say this is going to overestimate how far the fire has moved at this point because it's going to pick up on some of the heat that's in the smoke plume, but it will give us an idea and a general mapping of where this fire is moving. So one thing that's working for us towards the north, if it keeps going up towards the northeast, is we just had the Dixie fire not too long ago. I should know exactly when that was. I'm not seeing. I spent weeks forecasting the Dixie fire. I should definitely know what year that was. Okay, July 13, 2021. So that large burn scar right there is going to be from 2021. So a lot of those fuels have been cleared out recently. So I'm not too worried about it reaching Lake Almanor or Chester or anything like that. I would say my top worry right now is it reaching mineral. Now, it does look like we still have some distance there between the fire and mineral, 3 to 4 miles, and that's maybe worst case scenario because this often overestimates how far the fire's gone. But you can see how maybe far it has gone throughout the day today. And I mean, it's only 5:15, and it looks like things are going to be remaining fairly dry overnight tonight. So we may see this fire continue to spread towards the north. The one thing that should be working in our favor tonight, because it looks like it's staying warm, it's staying dry, is it is showing the winds calming down tonight and actually moving from a more northeasterly direction, which would try to push this fire back in on itself. And what will also happen is, I imagine a lot of this growth that we're seeing today is within Mill Creek right here, or this canyon, because you get your winds funneling in that canyon, and if they're moving up the canyon right now, overnight those winds should be moving down the canyon. So it would actually start working in our favor instead of against us. You see mineral up here. That's the most recent fire perimeter data that we have to go off of. And then we also have Mill Creek Resort down there. That's maybe another one of my concerns, just off of 172. As of this morning, there was about 7 miles of distance. It looks like that's been cut down to maybe 3.5 at this point. Zooming in here. Want to see if we can get a name on this little community that we're looking at. And not popping up on that map. Alright, so let's maybe take a different Skycam tour. Let's check out what this has been looking like, how it's been changing. I haven't refreshed these in a little while. So, clear skies, we heat up, we dry out in the afternoon, and then you're going to see this quickly pick up. This is the Stover 1 camera, so we're going to be looking almost from the east. I believe this is the camera that's right by Chester. Yeah, just to the southwest of Chester, west of Lake Almanor. And you can see what I was talking about with a lot of the fuels being burnt out by the Dixie fire. Look at that hillside right there. So that's why I'm not too worried about this fire going through the Dixie fire burn scar. That camera we're looking at is right over here. That also tells you how large this smoke plume is right now, because if our camera is all the way over here and it's looking at the fire, how large of a distance is that? That's about 15-mile distance, and that's what the smoke plume looks like from just southwest of Chester. And yeah, so somebody just asked, did the fire blow up today? It certainly did. So yeah, my forecast this morning, bit too optimistic to say the least. You know, we hadn't seen much growth on it over the last week. Looked like conditions were similar, but I think what we've kind of been able to figure out is trying to figure out why has it blown up so much more today than in previous days. Like, this is the most active it's been since the first week that it started. So that first week, that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and maybe especially that Friday, we're seeing a lot of activity on it. And then for about a week plus 2 or 3 days, we saw very little growth. And then now all of a sudden, the park fire is just absolutely blowing up today. So, number of reasons for that. It's hot out there. It's very dry. It's 5:18 right now, and you're still seeing some of these temperatures. That one's probably the closest weather station to where this fire is. And that one is 95 at 5:18. So the max temperature, 95 was their max temperature today. But look at the min relative humidity, 16% today. So we're a little drier than in previous days. And a big part of the reason for that is most likely because we started this morning with pretty clear skies. And that's actually because there wasn't much growth the last couple of days. So it's almost like when I was doing the forecast this morning, I used the fact that there hadn't been much growth over the last couple of days as my reasoning for why we wouldn't see much growth throughout the day today. But I actually should have thought the exact opposite. What I should have thought is, we haven't seen much growth over the last couple of days. A big part of the reason that we didn't have a lot of growth last week, even though we had very challenging weather forecasts, was because we had a lot of smoke over the fire. But because there wasn't much activity over the last couple of days, this morning we had about the clearest visibility over the fire that we've had in a while. So that took away that nice little smoke barrier that we had. We've been able to heat up into the mid-90s. That relative humidity, as we saw, dropped down into the teens. And because of that, we have a lot more activity. That, plus the fact that this is an area where the fuels haven't been burnt out in decades. So hot, dry, abundant fuels with a lack of fire history. Winds, I would say, are still kind of the question mark, because you look at that wind, that shows 12 miles per hour, and this is the closest weather station to the fire. That 12 miles per hour is not very much at all. What we don't know, though, is what the winds are like in the canyon. Because in the canyon, your winds are most likely going to be stronger, especially when you're heating up as much as we've seen. And yeah, as Ridge Runner said, inversion certainly lifted. There was a camera that actually showed it pretty well, where when you have an inversion, that's where you have, in like the morning, you have your cool air below your warm air. So it's almost like you're like salad dressing. Like overnight, your surface cools off a lot. So then your cool, dense air is right on the surface. And then there's just not a lot of flow in the atmosphere, because since the denser air is down at the surface, it doesn't really want to rise. But then what's happened as we got into the afternoon, in large part because we didn't have very much smoke cover this morning, the surface has been able to heat up a lot more. And then as the surface heats up a lot more, that heats up the air, that air becomes less dense, it wants to rise, and then it breaks through that inversion exactly like that camera is showing right there. So, and then once you start getting that much rising motion, then you're going to get wind coming in from all different directions to try to take the place of the air that's rising. That's when your wildfire can actually start to create its own weather. And that right there is one of the most active wildfires that we've seen this entire year. Now, I don't want to let the optimist in me steer me wrong again, because certainly that was the problem this morning. But, I mean, that's what it looked like about an hour ago. Does it look like it's starting to lie down a little bit? That's what it looked like maybe. So this whole camera goes for about 6 hours. So I would imagine that's maybe about an hour ago. See how that's basically going up into the stratosphere, that large pyrocumulus cloud. And then starts to decrease, but fires often pulse as well. You can actually kind of see that throughout this imagery, where it'll pulse up, and then it'll hit another patch of timber, and then it'll pulse up again, and then it'll pulse up again. And Jeffrey just said, wind speeds up when compressed against an obstruction, like mountainous terrain. Yeah, that's something that we've been talking about on the Google Earth imagery right here. It also compresses, or is kind of funneled within a canyon, like what we're seeing right here. It's almost, again, like putting your thumb over the end of a hose, and that does look to be where a lot of our growth has been over the day today. So, yeah, somebody just said the fire is shooting for 3rd place. That is a reference to some of our CAL FIRE stats here. I'm interested to see how many more acreage we'd have to burn to officially get into 3rd place. So top 20 largest wildfires. Coming over to watch duty. What's the fire at right now? Last update, 403. Let's see if they've updated that acreage. It's showing, nope, I haven't seen an update on that. It's still showing about 403,000 acres. Park Fire is sitting at number 4, and the Mendocino complex at number 3 is 460. So we have a ways to go, but it certainly looks like we're chewing up a lot of acreage right now. See, where that red is going to be roughly where where the fire spread has been today. That's going to overestimate it, but that does give us a general idea. Part of the reason for that, the direction it's going, or the direction the winds are coming from the southwest. So that's why the fire moving up towards the northeast, as we've also been able to see on all our different cameras. And I want to try to finish that down a little bit, or was that just kind of a break between the pulses? So let's actually just go the last hour, because that will help us answer that question. So, no, I'd say it still looks extremely active right now. anytime you see pyrocumulus, that means it is very active. So I see somebody said somebody just got back to their cabin in Chester today. Yeah, we've been talking about Chester, but the good news there is you have the Dixie fire scar, and that was 2021. I believe we looked up the date on that, and one of the cameras actually shows what that burn scar looks like. Just not much fuel there anymore. So, not too worried about it reaching Lake Almanor and going through that burn scar. I would say what I'm most worried about right now is where we see the largest amount of structures to the north of this fire, which is mineral, and then this little cluster of structures in there. If anyone knows the name of that, please put it in the chat. I think I had said it earlier in the live stream, but it's not coming to mind right now. Might be on the Google Earth imagery as well. Should be right about in here. Is that Camp Tehama? Is that cluster of structures that we're looking at in there? Difficult to tell. So just coming back here. Looks like it looks like those new red and orange boxes up there, that's some of that new heat detection. Again, some of that might be just picking up on all of the heat that we have in this smoke plume, but some of it also might be picking up on some of the heat that's on the ground. Yeah, somebody said Mill Creek. I think that maybe... Yeah, that... Oh, actually, I know the best map. So it's going to be... I always forget about this map. But if you zoom all the way in on Windy... And... No, it didn't really help us too much. And I am interested to see... So Windy was showing the potential for winds around 25 to 30 miles per hour. The reason I didn't go with that, though, for my forecast today is because they'd been overestimating the winds almost every day for the last 5 days. But perhaps part of the reason the models were overestimating the wind is because in the previous days we had a lot of smoke over the fire. So, yeah, somebody said that's Mill Creek. So that answers that question. That little cluster of structures there. That actually might have just transitioned into my new top concern for this fire just because it looks to be closer to where some of that heat is showing up right now. Disclaimer again, that heat is an over-exaggeration, but does look to be closer than mineral, especially for the direction that this fire is going, which is towards the northeast. So, one good thing to do, we want to make sure that we're staying updated with watch duty here. I think somebody mentioned that they could see the tanker on the north side of this fire. So there we go. There's CAL FIRE Tanker 93. Looks like that's going to be moving up. They said they were doing it on the south side of the Mill Creek drainage. So it'll be interesting to see where that one flies in. Looks like there's another one right there. It's an air tanker type 1. And then helicopters all over the... Looks like they're on kind of the west flank of this finger that's now extending up towards the northeast. And then are these guys on the east side? Yeah, interesting. So here you can see that big canyon that we have in there. That looks to be Mill Creek. And then this gives us an idea of where that heat activity has gone. So, wide view of the fire. This shows you, if you're watching this live stream and you're in Chico, you're in a pretty good position. The fire's moving away from you. Same with Red Bluff. Not even that worried about Manton or Shingletown because you have the Ponderosa fire between you and where we have some of this activity. Forest Ranch, Butte Meadows, fire is actually still moving away from you. And now it looks like it's just moving right between where we're seeing a lot of these drops. So you see the planes on the east side. Their flight paths are going to give us a general idea of where the east of this fire is. And then these helicopters are going to give us a general idea of where the west of this fire is. And based on where they're dropping right now, hopefully that shows that the fire is not extended as far north as the heat signature is making it look like it has. But if we look at some of the cameras, it certainly looks like this fire is moving pretty quickly. So yeah, I see Robert saying, I heard the National Guard has been called in, Oregon too. Yeah, I heard resources from Utah, from Texas, and we haven't actually looked at that number. Interested to see how much it's gone up. Every camera angle that we're seeing throughout the day today is just like nothing we've seen over the entire last week. So resources assigned over 6,000 personnel, over 500 engines, 132 crews, 44 helicopters, and then it looks like we now have some of those large air tankers on the fire as well. There's air tanker type 3. Looks like, yeah, it's dropping on the south side of the Mill Creek drainage, just as the watch duty update was saying it was going to do. You can imagine it just dropped right there. I wonder if we can get a camera shot of that. So we might be able to see that from this angle if we reload the last 15 minutes here. If anybody has really good eyes, look out for an air tanker coming up the east side right there. Yeah, I wasn't really able to see anything. So that's the view from just west of Lake Almanor. And this is going to be the view from kind of the east, looking as this fire moves up towards the northeast. They're going to have to zoom out because the smoke plume is going so high at this point. You see that huge pyrocumulus cloud right there. Again, whenever it looks like that, that's when the fire is actually starting to create its own weather. That still looks a bit more encouraging. I mean, you look at what it looked like about an hour to 2 hours ago. It's basically reaching up into the stratosphere, and then watch as it starts to lie down a little bit towards the end here. What I'm hoping is that means we're moving in the right direction. What is working against us, though, is the fact that it does look like it's going to be staying dry tonight. And when we've seen that in previous days, the fire activity continued through the overnight hours. Whereas last week, when we had the good moisture recoveries overnight, it diminished activity overnight. Does look like the winds should be shifting direction. Now, I don't really trust these winds all that much, though. I think for today's forecast, we're going to go with windy. Seems to be... I think windy still overestimated the winds today, but it does look to be more accurate than that other one we're looking at. So let's see what they say happens tonight. So that's I would say some good news there. They do show the winds coming down tonight and actually shifting direction again, almost coming from the east, which would hopefully try to push the fire back in on itself. And it looks like the winds are still very calm even throughout tomorrow morning. Now I'm a bit worried to show what it's saying for tomorrow afternoon. Yeah, tomorrow afternoon looks like it's showing that same southwesterly flow again, around 25 miles per hour. So maybe not as windy as today, but still potentially windier than we were last week. Now again, a big part of that, though, is how much of the smoke that's being produced right now is going to settle down over the fire overnight tonight when those winds calm down. Because that's been one of the trickiest parts about forecasting this fire, is when the smoke settles down over the fire, then it doesn't heat up as much, it doesn't dry up as much, and then your inversion doesn't lift and your fire is calm throughout the day. But then when you start with clear skies, then this is what happens. It basically heats up, dries out, and then you get a bunch of spot fires, which lead to rapid growth on the fire. So tonight, what I'm hoping is that as the winds calm down, all of the smoke that's been produced throughout the day today starts to settle down over the fire. So looking at this map, see if there's been any change. That's actually... So the last time we looked at this, I believe this orange square was a red square, which would be indicating more heat activity. So the fact that it went from red to orange might mean that it's starting to ease up a bit. And I mean, if we look at some of the different camera shots, it does look like it's beginning to lie down just slightly. I don't want to overplay that because it certainly still looks extremely active right now. You see how quickly some of those spot fires grew. See the pyrocumulus cloud. But it does look, I'd say, less active than when I started this live stream about an hour ago. And then I see Robert says some strong winds off and on. Yeah, winds have been definitely the trickiest part of the forecast today. So watch duty. Let's see what their most recent update says. Does look like the air tankers have arrived. So that was what the last update was saying when we looked at this. I'll zoom in to the northeastern side of this fire so you can kind of watch what those helicopters, what some of the tankers are doing, as I try to figure out if there's been any recent updates. So it's interesting, while this fire is rapidly increasing in the northeastern section, it looks like they're reducing evacuation orders to evacuation warnings in other sections. So that really tells you that when you have a fire this large, it really depends on where you are, your level of concern. Because if you just see that smoke plume and you're living near this fire, like you see a video of it, you might think you're in immediate danger. But if you're down in Paradise, Magalia, Chico, Red Bluff, I would maybe even go as far to say Manton and Shingletown, you guys are in a pretty good position. The reason I put in Manton and Shingletown there is because we do have that Ponderosa fire between where we're seeing a lot of the heat activity right now and where those communities are. But especially for Red Bluff, Chico, Paradise, Magalia, fire is up well to the north of you, and the winds are from the south, actually pushing the fire away from you. So in those areas, we're looking pretty good. Where there's a bit more concern, then I should say, not a bit, there's a lot more concern than what I had this morning. It's in the areas like Mill Creek and Mineral, which are to the northeast of this fire. Now, with that being said, it does hopefully look like it's starting to ease up a bit. Let's check out this one. Let's do the 3-hour loop on it. Well, one thing's for sure, I will never do another weather forecast in California or wildfire forecast where I say, oh, this might be my last video because it hasn't been active in the last 5 or 6 days. Never count out a wildfire in California, especially when it's going to be in the triple digits, relative humidity in the teens, and you don't have the same smoke cover that you've had in previous days, which perhaps diminished activity on previous days where there should have been more. Lessons learned. It's only my 5th year wildfire forecasting, and every single year I learn more and more lessons. So although forecast was wrong this morning, I can guarantee in 30 years I will not be making those mistakes. No promises for the rest of this season, though. So right there, certainly still a lot of smoke coming off of this fire. So I'm not going to say that it's calmed down just yet. It still looks like there's a lot of heat coming off of this fire. So just zooming out, And looking at the change from where it was this morning, or that's the most recent perimeter that we had. Yesterday's heat, very little, and most of it actually looked to be within the perimeter, almost looked like nothing going on there. And then those southwesterly winds, maybe some of the part of why it's been picking up, but more so because of the lack of fire history, and then how hot and dry it is today, and then the lack of smoke this morning has allowed it to get a lot hotter and drier than previous days. And now when we look at the heat signature, that's the most active it's been in over a week. And that's going to overestimate how far the fire is, but it's certainly a lot closer to those communities than we would like to see it. Now, with that being said, a lot of those red squares that we had been seeing previously are now turning into orange squares, which means the satellite's picking up on less heat than before. We've also seen a lot of air attack on this fire. They're starting to use some of the tankers here, and tankers look to be mostly on the eastern side of where this finger would be extending up towards mineral. And then it looks like they're using a lot of helicopters on the western side. So kind of squeezing this fire together, because when a fire is this active, clicking in here, that's not our best view right there. When a fire is this active, you're not going to be doing tankers or helicopters directly in front of the fire. There's just going to be too much smoke. But you can still do it on the sides of the fire. And if you look closely, you can actually see some of the aircraft coming in along the east side of this fire every once in a while. And yeah, still a lot of smoke, still a lot of activity coming off of it, but it doesn't look to be as bad as an hour ago when we had that huge pyrocumulus coming off of the fire right there. So keep getting distracted from reading watch duty update. Yeah, the last one looks to be them requesting those air tankers, and then some of the evacuation updates that they have right there. So again, that's why it's always important to stay updated with evacuation warnings, evacuation orders. Especially at the peak of wildfire season in California, things can change rapidly. So, Ridge Runner says, we have more fires coming. The big lightning event hasn't hit us yet. So, yeah, the thunderstorms actually seemed to help us out this last weekend. Those are always a bit of a wild card about what's going to happen when thunderstorms come through. Can lead to gusty erratic winds, can lead to lightning starting new fires, which then pulls some of our resources off of this fire. Thunderstorms on Saturday seem to actually bring some nice drizzle to the fire, some good cloud cover, diminished activity. But in a way, that actually ended up hurting us in the long run, because we didn't have a lot of activity over the weekend. We started out today with just beautiful blue skies, although beautiful is probably the wrong word to use here. And then because of that, it allowed us to heat up and dry out a lot more. And then that's what happened throughout the day today. Most active this fire has been since the first week it started. So I want to check the weather stations on the ground, see if things are starting to cool off at all. And not really. That weather station is the closest one that we can see to the fire, and it's still 94 degrees. Its min relative humidity is 15%, so very hot, very dry. Still max wind gusts only around 13, but when it's that dry, your winds actually don't need to be that strong in order to get a lot of growth. And then tomorrow's forecast looks like it's going to be very hot, actually even drier tomorrow. And then Windy was saying winds not as strong tomorrow as what we had today, but still with the potential to be over 20 to 25 miles per hour. So based on what's happened today, you would expect it to be very active again tomorrow, which could be Some bad news for these communities up towards the north of the fire, because once again the winds would be coming from the southwest. The only thing that I think could really help us out is the fact that the winds are supposed to be calming down overnight tonight. And then what I'm hoping is that all of this smoke that was produced throughout the day today, and it certainly was a lot of smoke, hoping that that just settles over the fire so then we don't heat up as much tomorrow, and that inversion doesn't lift tomorrow like what we saw today. So this is the view from Mineral. Let's actually update this one because this is probably the most important camera to keep our eye on as that one's loading. So Mineral's up here. That's going to be looking down at the fire, and it does still certainly look very hot on that side of the fire. So it'll probably be a bit glitchy on the live stream as it's loading, but then I can replay it. So yeah, the smoke coming directly at that Mineral camera, which means that you never want to see smoke moving at your camera because that means the fire is moving at your camera. Last time we measured, let's just assume the fire is going to go the direction of the winds. And then let's also assume that the heat that it's picking up on is where the fire is actually extended to, even though it's most likely an over-exaggeration. That's still showing about 3.5 miles between some of that heat and Mineral. So we do have still some decent distance there. And the fact that some of these cameras have started to show things slightly easing up at least makes me feel a little bit better about Mineral. Watch as the smoke plume starts. Nope, it was just the break between pulses. If you go back in the live stream about 15 minutes, I was posing that question of, okay, is the fire calming down or is it just a break between pulses? Because you can always see that on wildfires. You can actually see right here where it pulses again. Some of them larger than others. And then it looks like it's calming down, but then the most recent one starts to show another pulse. So, yeah, it doesn't look like it's calming down just yet. It actually looks like there's more growth, more activity coming off at that pyrocumulus cloud right there. It's maybe representative of one of those boxes turning red within the last time we looked at this. Still showing a lot of heat, especially on that kind of northwestern part of this finger that is now extending up into all of these fuels that haven't burnt out in a very long time. So, yeah, it was lots of different things in the forecast today that worked against us. Hot, dry, we'll call it moderate winds. We haven't really been able to get a definitive answer on how windy it's been. Abundant fuels that haven't burnt out in decades, and I think what ended up being the biggest factor is that we had clear skies this morning. So then we were able to heat up a lot more, which was able to allow the fire to break through that inversion. And then once it picked up speed, it's almost like it got momentum. And then it starts creating its own weather. And then it's also leading to a lot more spot fires as well. That was something that Watch Duty, I believe, said in one of these updates that they were getting a number of spot fires. Fire activity in the area of the Mill Creek drainage, east to northeast side, continues to increase with some spotting noted. 6 copters are currently working in the area. Now we can see they've got some tankers on it as well. With potentially more on the way. So I'm not too sure if we're actually getting any new information here. So I think what I'm going to do is maybe wrap up this live stream and then do a much more concise one, hopefully in about a 10-minute live stream, just so that if anybody comes to my channel page, then there's something that they could just quickly watch to get all the most kind of concise information quickly, as opposed to trying to decipher all the information we've been able to figure out over the last hour and a half that I've been doing this live stream. So I think I'll shut this one down, do a concise update. You can find that on my channel pretty briefly. I think the last thing that I'll say though is, yeah, apologies for that forecast this morning. I was expecting it to just be calm like it had for the last week, and it certainly has not been. It's been the most active it's been in over a week, and it looks like it's going to be hot and dry again tomorrow. But I do just see that somebody said Watch Duty just updated. So now it's showing up to 406,000 acres, so plus 3,000 there. What I'm really hoping right now is that this is just picking up on a lot of the heat that's in the smoke plume, and it's just wildly over-exaggerating how much the fire has actually moved throughout the day today. But I'm kind of not banking on that, just based on a lot of the cameras that we've seen, that the fire has been just ridiculously active. And then let's see if they actually did. It looks like their last official update that they put was still that update to evacuation orders. So I'm going to go record the more concise version of this video, just so when people come to my channel, they can get the most important information as quickly as possible. Expecting the activity to start to die down, but I mean, it still looks like the fire is very active right now.